House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan sought to link New York City's crime problem to Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who is prosecuting former President Donald Trump. Here he is on Monday's field hearing held in Manhattan. Let's watch.
One of Mr. Bragg's first actions upon taking office in January of 2022 was to put out a memo that directed his assistant district attorneys not to prosecute certain crimes, including trespassing and resisting arrest. The memo also stated that armed robberies should not be prosecuted as felonies. Instead, they were to be considered as misdemeanor larceny unless someone was shot during the course of the robbery. Thank goodness, after a backlash from police groups and the public, Mr. Bragg agreed to prosecute some robberies as felonies, but left the rest of the memo in place. The president of NYPD Detectives Endowment Association said, quote, "Bragg gives criminals the roadmap to freedom from prosecution and control of our streets. In Bragg's Manhattan, you can resist arrest, deal drugs, obstruct arrest, and even carry a gun to get away with it. And guess what happened under this new policy? More crime."
He also added some statistics about New York City's crime rate, including a 23% uptick in major crime in 2022, which was Bragg's first year on the job.
During the course of the 4 hours, lawmakers on the panel took turns trading spats and stats about New York City's crime. Democrats questioned the committee's motive for holding the hearing. Here's what the committee's ranking member, Jerry Nadler, had to say.
Let me be very clear. We are here today in Lower Manhattan for one reason and one reason only. The chairman is doing the bidding of Donald Trump. Committee Republicans designed this hearing to intimidate and deter the duly elected district attorney of Manhattan from doing the work his constituents elected him to do. Using this committee to undermine that process as it unfolds is cynical, unethical, and given the violence unleashed on the Capitol by the former president, just plain dangerous. Now, we all grieve for the victims of violent crime, here in Manhattan and everywhere. But it is shameful that the Republicans of this committee would use the pretext of violent crime as an excuse to play tourist in New York and bully the district attorney.
Meanwhile, others have pointed to reports showing that while Jordan held a hearing hyper-focused on New York City crime, his home state of Ohio's homicide rate exceeds that of New York. So, to me, this feels like a lot of people playing politics and very few folks being sincerely concerned about crime in the least. When you look at the statistics, it is true that New York City is the 5th safest big city in America after Honolulu, Virginia Beach, Henderson, Nevada, and El Paso, Texas. It's also true that there are a number of conservative-led cities that have higher crime rates than New York. That's not an excuse. Always, everyone should be looking to lower crime rates. The question is, are Republicans really arguing that Alvin Bragg, day one in office, signaled to the people of New York City, that the criminals of New York City, that automatically they need to go and increase the crime rate by 23%? Yep. Or did COVID shutdowns being eased and all of those kinds of things at the start of 2022, end of 2021 have more an effect here? And on the flip side, I will say, I think that the characterizing everything, I mean, look, this is about Donald Trump. But, like, who cares? People are going to play politics. At the end of the day, you can either defend your record or not defend your record, Alvin Bragg's record. And I do think that this particular prosecution of Donald Trump is not the best case that they have against him. So I'm not exactly upset at Republicans for wanting to push back by whatever means possible.
Right, but they're pushing back in a very lame way by invoking crime here because, as you've pointed out, and I readily concede, New York City is not, if you want to point to crime getting worse or bad policies creating crime, New York City is not the city you want to cite as your example. Yeah. They're doing that solely because this is an effort to defend Donald Trump from Alvin Bragg, which, like people, Republican Party, get a hobby. Like, defending Donald Trump to the mat is all they will do when there is a crime problem in many cities, including the city they're already in, Washington, D.C. This city has a far worse crime problem than New York City. I was looking at the murder rate. It was 203 murders in the district in 2022. That was down slightly from 2021, which was 226 murders. But over time, that's a massive increase. That was the first time you had 2 years in a row with more than 200 murders. Now, again, I always say, if you go back to, you take a snapshot from like the early 90s, there was twice as many murders.
Right.
But this is still a lot more murders than there were 20 years ago or 10 or 15 years ago.
Right.
So it is trending up, and that's just one measure of violent crime. So things are getting worse in a lot of cities. Yes, the crime rate is pretty bad in a lot of red states. It's also bad in some blue cities that are in blue states.
Blue cities and red states,
it's
purple states like Cleveland.
It's a colorful little quilt of crime and murder and violence that no one is very serious about solving. And again, I don't think Democrats are very serious about solving it, and Republicans aren't serious about solving it if all they care about is Donald Trump's ego.
I mean, look, I would agree with that. Democrats aren't very serious about solving it. I mean, we do have information about the kinds of factors that cause crime rates to go up and down. I really appreciate that you point to how high stats were in the 90s and how people attribute those spikes to a lot of factors that have nothing to do with policing, militarizing our police force, the kind of things that people turn to now. You know, people attribute a good chunk of that just to getting lead out of our gas in our buildings and how that affected kids' brain development. You mentioned air conditioners last time we talked about that, and how just being hot affects people's crime rates and gets them out into the streets and causing trouble. A lot of leftists will point to various kinds of summer programs and after-school programs and childcare opportunities that make it so that people have structured activities and are in the streets. Financial support that families have to be able to send their kids to camp or to stay home with their kids and not have to take multiple jobs where they're not there to monitor their children's behavior. But we're not having a conversation about that because they don't think either side is interested in actually addressing the problem. They live in walled communities where they're largely safe from the effects of this kind of stuff. They just want to use it as a political pulpit. And when you look at this list, historian Kevin Cruz tweeted out of the 15 most dangerous cities in America. They're cities that are never part of the crime conversation at all. St. Louis, Missouri, Mobile, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, Baltimore, Maryland, which is a part of the conversation sometimes. President Trump, we remember what you had to say. Right. Memphis, Tennessee, Detroit is. Cleveland is one of the most dangerous big cities in America and is rarely a part of this conversation. New Orleans, Shreveport, Louisiana, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Little Rock, Arkansas, a heck of a lot of these southern red cities. And again, it's not about a blame game. There's obviously blue cities mixed in here as well. But why are we talking about it in those terms?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Oakland, California is often on this list. Albuquerque is often on this list. Flint, Michigan in previous years was very high up. I remember because I lived in Michigan. There were like three. Detroit was there was a point in time at which, when I was younger, where Detroit was like third after two other Michigan cities. It was bad times for the Mitten State.
So what do you think about the Alvin Bragg piece of this? I mean, at the end of the day, Jim Jordan, do you think that it is kind of useful politically for him to be making this attack? Whatever we think substantively, do you think it helps the Republican Party? Do you just throw things at the wall and see what sticks? Do you think this pressure campaign might have the effect of making Bragg's life uncomfortable enough to affect the prosecution of Donald Trump?
I mean, I also don't think it's, Jim Jordan himself has now faced some Alvin Bragg's going after him, right, for the kind of something akin to witness tampering. That seems beside the point, too. But I think it just goes to show you the whole Donald Trump continues to have on the party, in which he made everyone take a field trip to New York City in order to flatter Donald Trump. This is not a healthy trajectory, not because crime is a made-up problem or doesn't exist. It is a problem in certain places. It is getting worse. I suspect it has something to do with the pandemic and the collapse of social structures for a lot of young people in desperate situations. Maybe some organized crime not being confronted in the way it should be, and so on and so forth. And I tend to think more illegal gun possessions that could be prosecuted that aren't being prosecuted in some places. But we have to talk through that with seriousness and not with if you would stop going after Donald Trump. I mean, you can make the case that he shouldn't be going after Donald Trump, as we've made on the show multiple times, because of the weakness of the criminal theory here. But that would be the line I would continue to pursue if you want to cast doubt on this, rather than Alvin Bragg should spend more time, I don't know, on something else. Seems very silly.
I agree, for sure. More Rising after this.